Hey there, it's Karen. And in this video, I'm going to give you the overview of the stages in the time tracking journal. And I'm also going to talk about how long each phase should take. Because in the past, when I've gotten questions about the time tracking journal, people think that it needs to be more of a long, drawn out process than it actually is. And so I wanted to just give you a little bit of context for how this is going to work, and then also kind of break it up into stages so you can see how all of these pieces fit together, and also how you can kind of plan this in your head so you can see why we're doing what we're doing. Because when you're going to go through this process, really ultimately the actual journal itself and all of these supplemental materials I'm going to give you, like the Google Slides or the Google document, really that's just a way for me to transfer this information to you. The main thing that needs to happen in order for kids to be successful is that they need to have a strategy that allows them to plan, and then also start to be more aware of time. And then also they need some good models so that they can start to learn to use inner self-talk for both building a positive self-image about themselves. And part of that is using their episodic memory and taking evidence and experiences from the past and applying them to new experiences and building that self-belief that they can do whatever it is that they're wanting to do. So making them feel successful, but also part of that self-talk is strategy self-talk. So really what we need to do is be modeling that for kids along the way, because if they're having executive functioning issues, then they're probably not engaging in that self-talk. So this journal is just a way to help structure the process of helping kids plan and execute on difficult tasks, and really walking them through the steps that they should be doing in their heads. We're just taking something that should be going on internally and making it external for them. And really the goal is for this process to be kind of condensed over time. So it is going to take a little bit longer the first couple times you do it, but ultimately what you want to do is start to create some tools for kids to have so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do this for a new task. And eventually you'd hope, as you start doing this for more and more things in a child's day, whether it be academic, whether it be things in their home environment, as you do this, you would hope that they would start to be applying this to new experiences. So the more you do this, the more that kids are going to be able to do that. So the time journal itself is going to be broken down into 5 key stages. So I'm going to walk through them right now. And then when you watch the longer video, you're just going to get a little bit more of an in-depth explanation of what needs to happen. So the first set of questions that you're going to see in the journal that you're going to want to walk kids through is the setup phase. Now, this total setup phase, again, yes, the first few times you do it, you're not necessarily going to be as familiar with the strategy. The child is not going to be as familiar, so it might take a little bit longer, but ultimately you can get through this in 3 to 5 minutes or maybe less, because it's really just kind of a quick setup conversation here. And the main things that you're going to be asking is, how long will this task take? And then you're going to be asking some questions about some basic if-then type of things. So those pros and cons questions that I'm going to guide you through, they should really just take a couple minutes. And then there's going to be some questions where we're going to be using tests of evidence, where we're going to talk to kids about how hard they think it's going to be and just kind of get their take on it. And then we're going to compare the before and after. And again, those things, you should be able to just talk through them. It's just kind of a quick conversation, and it really should just take a couple minutes. So all of this whole thing, this whole setup phase, the how long will this take, the pros and cons, how hard is this, should take less than 3 to 5 minutes. And again, when you get good at this, it can be really just kind of a quick boom, boom, boom conversation. So again, you don't want to make this a whole long drawn out discussion. It's just really a quick check-in here. And like I said, once you do this a couple times with a task, you're not really going to have to spend a long time here. And again, the main thing that you want to do is we want to talk about how long this is going to take. And then the main thing that we want to do as well is you're going to want to have your clock. So you're going to actually want to have a physical clock, and you're going to want to show kids how long it will take on the clock so that they can physically see from where the minute hand is going to move from here to here. That's how long it's going to take. So they need to see something visual. So the main thing that we want to do here, kind of the most important part of this setup phase, is showing them to see that time on the clock. So that's the main thing here. And then, so this is the setup phase here. And then we're going to move up to the planning phase. Now, the planning phase is where you're actually going to get into the strategy of what the steps are and the planning for whatever it is that you're doing. Now, here, what's going to happen is that the first time you do a task, you are going to have to really talk through a lot of the steps. So you're going to talk about what time you're starting. You will have already talked about how long it will take. So you're going to talk about the start time. You're going to talk about what the end goal is and how that looks and feels. And then you want to talk about what you actually need. So what actual materials you need to get ready, and then what the steps are, what you actually need to do. So the first time you do this, if it's something that you haven't walked kids through before and you haven't used this strategy with them, it is going to take a little bit longer. You are going to need to spend a little bit more time actually mapping out what you need to do, and then what the steps are. So that might take a little bit longer that first time, because you're going to be actually mapping out all those things, writing things down. And I also do recommend that you make this as visual as possible. So you might have to do some prep work here that first time, where you might be taking pictures of the child doing the actual steps. I recommend that if you have kids where you're writing the steps down and that's not working, it might need to be more visual for them. So we want to make this as visual as possible, especially what the end goal looks like. We want to make that visual, and then possibly we want to make the steps visual as well. So the first time you do this, it is going to take a little bit longer, but then what you have is that you can take what you made the first time, and then the next time you're doing whatever the routine is, you might just need a quick 1 to 2 minute check-in. Okay, here's what done looks like. Here your steps are. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So the next time you do it, it might be a simple matter of, all right, let's go back to this, this checklist of things that we did before. Let's review them and let's move forward. So again, the first time you do it, it is going to be a little bit longer, but then what you can do, if it's a routine that the child does over and over again, that you can keep whatever you made that first time, and then it's not going to take as long. So keep that in mind. This is something, again, that's going to be condensed as you move through this. And then also, once you do this with a couple different routines for the child, they might be able to move this through this whole process a little bit more quickly because they understand how to do it. So ideally, that's what we would want, is that we'd want them to understand, okay, well, we're going to talk about how long it takes. We're going to talk about how hard it is. Then we're going to move through, and we've got to figure out what the goal is, what that looks like. And then we've got to talk about our steps and what we need. So they'll know that process. That's the whole point. And that's what we do when we're using our executive functioning skills. We want them to get familiar with these steps. We want them to use it for novel situations. And we're just going to be adding to this over and over, and just gradually adding this to different routines over time. But of course, you do want to utilize those visual strategies that you've already made so that they can, again, you don't want to reinvent the wheel if you already went through this and talked about the steps for a certain task. So that planning phase is going to be your most time-consuming piece of this, especially that first time, but it can get less time-consuming as you go through it. And then the next questions that we have, these things on the next pages of the journal are going to be things that you're going to be wanting to model for the child as you're supporting them through the task. And then as they do the task over and over again, you're going to want to do that less and less, because you want them to be doing those are asking themselves those questions on their own and learning to monitor themselves. But the first couple times kids do this, you are going to have to kind of be there with them, do the activity with them, and then model some of that talk that you would be doing yourself if you're in the middle of doing something and you're thinking, oh, wait, whoops, did I miss a step here? And you're going to want to do those things out loud because, again, remember, you're modeling the things that are going on in your head. You're doing it externally. So those next questions on the next section are going to take, again, those are kind of embedded into the task itself. So that part is just going to be however long the task takes. So for example, if you have a 15-minute writing assignment, then that's going to be about 15 minutes. You're just going to be sprinkling this language in to whatever the task is, however long it takes. And so that's going to vary. And then also there are things here where, if let's say that you thought that the task was going to take you 15 minutes and then you realize that you did something wrong and we've got to backtrack, again, we want to model, whoops, okay, we missed a step. It's going to take a little bit longer this time. That's okay. We're going to go back and fix it. Next time it'll be a little bit more, we'll move through it more quickly. Or if you realized that you underestimated how long it'll take, we might say something like, oh, well, we need to know next time. I guess we're going to have to plan for 20 minutes instead of 15 minutes. So these types of things, with am I on track? Do I need to change my plan? It kind of takes however long the task would take. So really, I can give you kind of a general benchmark for these parts, but for this part, this is going to vary based on whatever it is you're doing. And then once you're done doing the task, you've been monitoring, you've made sure that you're asking yourselves the questions and you've actually done the task, then we're going to kind of come back here and we're going to say, okay, am I finished? And then we can self-reflect a little bit. And again, this isn't going to be a long drawn out 30-minute conversation. It's just going to be a quick, what did I do well? What will I do differently? And then move on. So just kind of a quick check-in, because that is ultimately what you would do if you were doing something. You'd be thinking in your head. You wouldn't be like if you were in your kitchen making a recipe and you realized that you didn't do it the way that you wanted to, you wouldn't sit there for 30 minutes and reflect on it. You'd probably just kind of in your head think about it and save it for later for next time. So again, we want to model that out loud. And then the next time we do this task, we want to remind kids of that, because that's going to help build that memory and help them take that information they learned from one experience and apply it to the future. Because if we don't externalize, kids are less likely to take information that they have learned from one experience and transfer it onto another, whether it be doing that same task or whether it be doing a task that is similar and there's some transferable information there. So that is why we're talking through this with kids. We want to make sure that we're doing this self-talk for them so that they understand what needs to be happening in their heads that they might not already be doing. And again, if kids want to use some type of a visual to, again, the journal itself is a visual strategy where they can look at the questions they should be asking themselves. That's something they can do as well. You don't have to necessarily tell them, okay, you'll have to do this in your head. You can't write it down. Well, that's not the point. The point is that we want to teach them to use strategies. So it is okay to teach them some ways that they can remember what things to think about. And that's the whole point of using a visual strategy. Again, usually with the evaluation stage, we want to make it pretty quick, just a quick check-in. Again, 3 to 5 minutes. At the very beginning, it might take a little bit longer because kids might not know how to answer these questions. You might have to model some examples of how they would answer the questions. But you can, as you get good at this, might even take you less than 3 to 5 minutes. I'm just giving you kind of an estimate so you know how long you should spend on these different tasks. And then again, am I finished? If you realize you're not finished, well, obviously you're going to have to go back, to this right here, and it will take a little bit longer. But if you are finished, then you will just be able to move through this pretty quickly. The other thing, again, is that we want to make sure that when we're in this phase, we want to reference back to, all right, this is how done looks and feels. That's how we're going to be able to answer this question. A lot of times kids don't know how to answer this question, so they can never really self-reflect on this down here, and they don't have a good sense of how it actually looks and what it's like. And so as a result, they just don't really have that picture in their heads. They don't know how to execute the steps in order to get there. And they also appear like they're being lazy and unmotivated, because how can you get yourself motivated to do something that you can't even envision? Of course, you're not going to feel like doing it if you don't know what that end success looks like. So this is really important here to tie this back to this up here. We want to mention the end time again, because we always want to be drawing attention to that clock. And you actually, during this phase right here, want to be teaching kids to kind of look back at the clock, like, am I on track? Oh, whoops, we thought it was going to be, it was going to take 15 minutes, but we realized that it's taking a little bit longer. Or, if they're getting off track, doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, it's like, oh, whoops, our time's almost up and we need to keep getting back on track. So we want to be always referencing back to the clock, especially at the beginning and end, sometimes during, if they're getting off track and if they need some assistance with, managing impulses and making sure that they're focused on the task that they're doing so that they can get to that end goal and do it efficiently. But then also we want to talk about the end time, because what that's going to do is it's going to help them learn to estimate the time of different things that they're doing. Because a lot of times if they do have that time blindness, then what's going to happen is that they might either underestimate how long something is going to take and not give themselves enough time and not get things done, or they're going to be overwhelmed and they're going to avoid it because they're going to inflate it in their heads, because it just is hard and overwhelming, and it feels like it's going to take way longer than it is, and they might worry, I won't get to have time to do whatever it is I want to do, and they can kind of get into that negative downward spiral of thinking. So if we're repeatedly drawing their attention to that end time and what that 15 minutes or however long, however that felt, then that's going to be really important. And again, pointing out that end time, just a quick thing here, again, just looking on the clock, again, a quick 30-second, oh, look, here's where the hand is. How long did this take? Again, that's something really quick that you can do. And then how hard is this? How do you know that? Again, this is just kind of a quick 1 minute question that you want to ask, which is the same as this up here. But the reason we're doing it afterwards is that we are just wanting them to use some new information that they have to see if they still think it was as hard as they thought it was. Because there are many times where it might have been hard, but maybe it didn't take as long as they thought it would. And so it's like, okay, it's not so bad. I can do this. And really that's what we want to affirm with them. And then again, affirmation is, once you answer these questions, just a quick little mantra that you can give them that is a positive, something positive, some kind of positive feedback that you can say to them about what they did, something specific, not something general like good job, but something specific that they did well, even if they didn't actually meet their goal because of whatever reason, or even if they needed a lot of assistance to get to their goal. And, again, just something quick that you can model for them to give them that positive feedback, and also to get them used to saying that, using that positive self-talk about themselves. So this is the overview of the time journal. There is an additional video that is longer where I go way more in depth about how to use it. So definitely watch that. It's going to give you a lot more explanation, but I wanted to give you this quick overview to help you organize this process in your mind before you get into that in-depth video where I really get down into the specifics.